Good morning, everybody. So, in the last session, we have seen some of the topics that are related to the message authentication, and we have seen the topics related to the hash functions. All these things we have seen. In today's session, I am going to discuss about a topic on digital signatures. We are all very well aware of these signatures concept. So, whenever a sender wants to send some message or information to the other party, we will be putting just our signature. By looking at the signature, the receiver of the message will come to know that the message has been sent by the genuine user only. So, that is the importance of the signature. In general, we will come across this signatures concept everywhere in your daily life. Whenever you write a letter to your higher authorities, or for application purpose, or for some promotion purpose, anything, or for applying for some leave, you will come across this signature. So, you will write the matter, and at the end of the data, you will be attaching your signature. The other party or the receiver who sees your signature, he will come to a conclusion that this particular letter has been sent by so and so person only. So, it gives the authentication service. So, the signature gives the authentication service. In general, we will call this as the message authentication. Without these signatures also, we can authenticate the message. That is what we have seen in the earlier cases, where we are using the hash function, and you will be generating the hash function hash value by making use of the hash function, and you will append it to the original message, and then you will transmit it to the receiver. When the receiver receives the message, he will divide the message as well as the hash value separately, and he will calculate the hash value on the message, and then he is going to compare the calculated hash value, that is the new hash value, with the already existing hash value. If both are equal, we can say that the message is not altered, right. It is something related to the data integrity. In the similar fashion, the message authentication without these digital signatures is possible. But the disadvantage of this message authentication is it is going to protect the two parties in the sense the sender and the receiver. They are going to protect those two communicating parties who exchange the message from the third party, which is the unauthorized user. So, we have two users here. These are the legitimate users, genuine users, A and B. So, when message authentication is done between these two communicating parties, the message authentication is going to protect both these communicating parties, both these A and B, from the unauthenticated third party. So, third party, the message authentication does not allow the third party to make modifications or insertions or deletions. It is not possible by the third party. So, message authentication is going to protect this from the third party. But there are some situations where both the parties that are involved in the communication may have some disputes. This is very important. For example, if you take an example of these two parties, A and B. B is the receiver, let me take it as receiver, and A is the sender. The problems that may arise between these genuine two parties will be something like that. For example, in case 1, let me take the case 1 at the receiver end. We will see this with example also, I am just explaining it. The case 1 is the forgery that is performed at the receiver end. What this party B, that is the receiver, will do is he will generate a message and he will add the authentication data of this sender A, and he will claim that the message has been sent by sender A. This is called as forgery. So, the message that is generated by party B is having the authentication code of A, therefore, he can claim that the receiver can claim that the message has been sent by the actual sender A, though A is not actually involved in sending the message. So, this is one type of problem that may arise from the receiver's end. And we have another case, case 2. This is from the sender end, and this I can call it as denial service, denial of service or denying. So, the sender, if he finds that B is doing some type of forgery, he does not show any interest to send the further messages. So, he can simply deny of sending the messages to that party B. So, the party A can simply deny sending the message because the party B is involved in forging the message, and there is no way to prove that party A had sent the message, right. So, these are the two different problems that may arise if there is no concept of digital signatures. Assume that at present point of time, you just assume that we have only message authentication, and I told that the message authentication gives or protects these two parties. Genuine parties will be protected from the unauthorized party, but this message authentication itself is not sufficient to protect the attacks that happen between these genuine two parties. So, the message authentication is not going to protect these two parties against each other. So, for example, this is the example I have shown, right. You take two parties A and B, we will do it with an example, right. So, for this purpose, in order to protect one genuine party with the other genuine party who are actively involved in the communication of messages from to and fro, from A to B and B to A, these two type of errors or these two type of attacks may happen. One is from the receiver end, where he is capable of forging the message, which is not acceptable, and in case 2 it is from the sender end, where the sender is denying the sending of the message to the party. And you can see that both are from the legitimate users only. This sender is a legitimate user and the receiver is also the legitimate user. But these are the two problems that will arise. Let us have some deeper understanding of these two cases, how it can happen. Let me take a real time example. In case 1, where it is from the receiver end, the problem is from the receiver end and the receiver is going to perform the forgery. Let us take a simple real time example. For example, let me take two parties like this, and he is Shyam, who is the sender, and let us assume that the receiver is Radha. So, in the case 1, it is from the receiver end, therefore, Radha is going to perform some forgery. Let us take a real time example. So, let us assume that Shyam has sent a message which is related to electronic fund transfer. And listen carefully that all these examples what we are discussing is without digital signatures. We are having only message authentication. So, if you have the message authentication, what are the problems that may arise in the real life? This is what we are going to discuss. So, coming back to our example again, we have two parties, Shyam is the sender and Radha is the receiver. And assume that Shyam is going to transfer some 1000 rupees to Radha in the form of electronic fund transfer. But Radha is capable of forging the message. So what she will do is she will change the message from 1000 to 10,000. Let us assume like this. And Radha simply changes the message saying that 10,000 is the amount that has been sent by Shyam. This is possible because the message authentication does not protect the two parties, attacks from the two parties, genuine parties. And Radha can claim that large amount had been arrived at Radha, and she can claim that Shyam has sent 10,000 rupees, but actually Shyam has sent only 1,000 rupees. So this is one type of attack which is called as forgery. Radha is going to do forgery of the original message. This is the case 1 example, real time example. And case 2, why I am saying that both the cases are legitimate cases? Why? Because the attacks are going to happen from the legitimate users. These are the original parties that are involved in the communication, and they themselves are involved inside this forgery and denial. Right. So let us take case 2. Let us assume that Shyam has sent a message to Radha, and that message consists of some information related to stock market. And based upon this message that is sent by the Shyam, Radha assumes that the message is a genuine message. Why? Because it is sent from the genuine user who is Shyam, and she will take care, she will assume that she will put some investment in the stock market based on the information that is sent by the Shyam. Assume that after some time the stock market has collapsed, and the results of the stock market has a very bad adversary effect on Radha. By looking at the situation of Radha, Shyam can simply pretend that the message was not sent by him. He can simply deny it, that I didn't send any message to Radha about the stock market. So these are the two real-time examples that may happen in the daily life if we have only authentication service. Right. In order to protect these type of attacks that happen because of the genuine parties, we need to have something more than this message authentication, and that something more is nothing but the digital signatures. In simple terms, if there is a situation where there is no trust between the two communicating genuine parties, that is Shyam and Radha, they are involved in the communication, but there is no trust on each other. In such situation, the message authentication is not only is not at all sufficient. We need something more. That something more is achieved by making use of the digital signatures. So this is the importance of the digital signatures. We started our discussion with the message authentication, and we have gone through the disadvantages of having the message authentication. That is, it cannot protect, or it can only protect, the message authentication can only protect the communicating parties from the attacker, but it is not capable of protecting the attacks that happen between the two genuine parties. I am just giving a gist. So we have seen two different cases of general example where the receiver can do some forgery type of attack and the sender can do some denial type of attack. And we have given some real-time examples of electronic fund transfer where Radha, the receiving party, can forgery it, saying that she can increase the amount and say that this is the actual amount that is sent by Shyam, that is the sending party. And similarly, I have given another example of real-time example of this stock market which is sent by Shyam, and after some time the Shyam will simply deny it, I didn't send any message. Because of these attacks that can happen between the genuine parties, there is something extra needed, that is other than this message authentication, which is nothing but the digital signatures. So, let us have the introduction part on these digital signatures. This part we have discussed that message authentication protects the two parties who exchange messages from any third party, but it does not protect the two parties against each other. So, there are several forms of dispute that may happen between the two communicating parties like this. This everything we have discussed. So, there are two parties that have decided to communicate. One is Shyam and the other party is Radha. Shyam is the sender and Radha is the receiver. So, the case one type of problem is forgery that happens at the receiver end. As I told that Radha may forge a different message and claim it came from Shyam. For this, what Radha has to do is, she has to simply create a message and append the authentication code using the key that Shyam and Radha share with each other. In the similar manner, Shyam, the second case, is the denial type of attack that happens at the sender end. Shyam can deny sending the message. Why? Because Radha is involved in forging the message, and Shyam can simply say that whatever message I sent that is not sent by me, the Radha has been forged. The Radha has performed the forgery on that message. So, in such situations where the two parties does not have the complete trust between this sender and the receiver, something more than authentication is needed. The most attractive solution to this problem is the digital signature. So, we have seen what is the disadvantage, what are the problems we have with these authentication, and now it's time to move our discussion on the digital signature properties. These are the simple properties that we are discussing, and once we go deep into the digital signatures, we will again come back to the requirements of the digital signatures. But for present point of time, you just understand there are some basic requirements or the basic properties of the digital signatures. The first property is the digital signature. It means digital signature. The digital signature must verify the author. That means it should verify the creator of the message, or you can say that author of the message. In addition to the verification of the author, it also has to verify the date and time of the signature. Very important. So, when you look at the real time examples, some of the government officials, everywhere you can see that they have the habit of putting the time or putting the date. For example, if I want to sign a document, I will put my signature like this, and I will put today's date like 11/11/21 like this. So, the digital signature should be in a position that it should verify the author as well as the date and time of the signature. So, remember that this is the digital signature. So, the date and time stamp will be taken automatically from the system. That is a different case, we will discuss it later. But one of the important property of the digital signature is it should verify the author's genuinity, and it should also verify the date and time of the signature. Similarly, the second property is it must authenticate the contents at the time of signature itself. So, authentication should be performed at the time of putting the signature itself. We know what this authentication is. Authentication of the contents should be performed at the time of signature itself. And the third general property of the digital signature is the digital signature must be verifiable by third parties. Very important. So, till now we have seen only two genuine parties, that is A and B, that is sender and receiver. But from the digital signatures concept, you will be introducing one more genuine party in between these two parties. One more genuine party will be there, and he is treated as the third party, and he is also a part of this communication. So this A and B, they rely on this third party, they believe this third party, they put their trust on this third party. Why some third party is required means, this third party is required to resolve the disputes that happen between these genuine parties. So whenever a dispute arises between the sender and receiver, the third party will be entering into the scene and he is going to resolve the things. So for resolving the disputes between the genuine parties, you require some very genuine third parties, and you have to give permission for this third party also. You have to give all the permissions. Why? Because without giving permissions, the third party cannot enter into the communication and he cannot resolve the issues. He should have some information. It happens in the real life also. For example, if there is a dispute between two persons, some third party, some elderly person will enter and he will resolve the dispute, and for the resolution of the dispute, the third party or the elderly person, he requires some information about the dispute, and similarly he requires some information about party A, and he also requires some information about the other person B. Until unless he knows the information related to party A and party B and something related to the message also, whatever happened, whatever the communication, the message that has been transferred between these two parties, the third party should have access for that also. Then only he can resolve it. So these are the three general properties of digital signature, that is verification of the author and the date and time of the signature, the authentication of the contents at the time of signature, and involvement of the third party for resolving the disputes. So keeping this in mind about the basic properties of the digital signatures, let us move our discussion towards the attacks and forgeries that can happen. We will see some of the attacks and some of the forgeries that can happen before this digital signature. That means we are still in the concept of authentication only, message authentication. We know why we require this message authentication, why we require these digital signatures. Why? Because we had some problems that happens if we have the message authentication. It is not protecting the genuine parties. It is not giving any solutions to the disputes that happen between the genuine parties. So for that purpose, we are going for the digital signature concept. But what are the different types of attacks that can happen between these parties? If an attacker is involved, what are the different forgeries that a third party can perform? So these are the general attacks and forgeries that we are going to discuss in case of some encryption is going to happen, or when there is a third party unauthorized user is there, how he is going to attack our communication channels. These are very simple topics we are going to discuss about this. And before that, let me go to the digital signature process. So this diagram gives the generalized description of how we are going to perform the digital signature. What are the essential elements of the digital signature process? So here we have two parties. Bob is sender and Alice is the receiver. He is sender and she is receiver. Bob wants to send a message M. Okay. So for this message M, he is going to apply some hash function, cryptographic hash function, where he is generating a value H, which is nothing but hash value or message digest. So once you have the hash value of the message, You just apply the encryption process with the private key of the sender itself. Very important. So, for performing the encryption, here we are making use of the private keys. So, whenever you use the private keys, that itself is saying that you are going to perform a signature concept. You are going to perform a signature. Private key of the sender is used for the signature process. So, the hash value is encrypted, it is secured, and then you get the Bob signature here. So, whenever you encrypt this hash value, it is something like the Bob signature. So, what Bob will do is, he will put the message and he will append the signature like this, and it is sent to the Alice. What Alice will do is, she will separate these two parts. The message part and the signature part will be separated. And for the message part, she will apply the same hash function, cryptographic hash function. These are equal. Same hash function is applied and she will generate a hash value H. She will keep it aside, and then she will take the second part, that is the signature part of the message is taken. Since it is encrypted with the private key of Bob, that is the sender, now Alice has to decrypt that particular signature using the Bob's public key. Very important. Right, Bob's public key is used to decrypt it, and she will generate another hash value H dash. Let us assume that it is H dash. She will perform a comparison operation of H and H dash. If both of them are equal, then the signature is valid. If both of them, the H and H dash are not equal, then the signature is not valid. So, this is how the digital signature process happens. Very simple process, but the important point you should remember here is that the hash value is being encrypted by making use of the private key of the sender. So, for signature, always remember that you are going to use the private key of the sender only, but this is something different from the encryption. If you remember the concepts of the public key encryption systems, you can observe there that you are going to encrypt the message using the public key of the receiver, and you are going to decrypt it with the private key of the receiver. There you are going to emphasize on the receiver's public key and private key. But this is completely different in case of digital signatures. In the signatures concept, you are going to emphasize on the sender's private key and public key. So, digital signature will be performed on the hash value by using the private key of the sender, and the decryption of the signature will be performed by making use of the public key of the sender. Very important. Please remember these points, and let us quickly move towards the attacks and forgeries that happen between the parties during the communication. Here you need to understand two different parties. We are not bothered. Here you can see that in any communication we require two parties, and there exists another party which is C, and assume that we are not going to bother about this B. We are worried about these two parties, that is the sender A and the attacker C. What type of attacks can C make on this A, communication of A, or what type of forgeries that C can perform on A? These are the things we are going to discuss under these attacks and forgeries. This is not digital signatures, right? So remember that A is the sender, A denotes the user who is going to put the signature. Give me 1 minute of time. Right. So A is the party or the user who is going to sign on the document and is being attacked, and C denotes the attacker. So based upon these two role plays, we are going to describe these attacks and forgeries. So attacks are being done by C. Why? Because he is the attacker, and similarly forgery will be done by C. Why? Because C is the attacker. So let us see. These are the 5 types of attacks that can that C can make on A's signature. The first one is the key only attack. So in this key only attack, the name itself is saying that it is an attack on the key, only key is attacked. So what attacker will do is, that is C only knows A's public key. So once C knows the A's public key, you cannot say that the entire security is compromised, but something has been compromised. Why? Because public key also plays important role. If something has to be known that is being encrypted using the private key of the other party, you should have the public key, right? So even the public key also plays important role in the encryption process. So we will discuss this distributing of public keys to the two parties in the next coming sessions, but right now you just remember that, or you just keep it in mind that the public key also is important. So once C knows the A's public key, then something has been compromised. So this type of attack is called as the key only attack. And the next attack what we are going to discuss is the known message attack. So by looking at this term, you can see that the attack is performed on a known message. So what happens in this attack is, C, the attacker will have some access to the genuine messages, to a set of messages that is sent by this A. So this C is having access to some set of messages. As we know that A, while sending the messages, he or she will put some signatures. So once the C is having the access to these messages, they are also having access to these signatures, so that the C can reproduce them after some time. This type of attack is called as the known message attack. Why? Because the set of messages are known to C, which is an attacker, and he or she is able to get the signatures. Why? Because they know the set of messages. And the third type of attack is generic chosen message attack. By looking at this term, you can simply say that it is an attack by an attacker on the chosen message, and this is called as the generic attack. I will tell you why this is called as generic attack. In order to perform this type of attack, what C will do is, the attacker will choose a list of messages before he or she attempts to break the A signature scheme. So A is the genuine party and C is the attacker. So C, what she will do is, she will simply choose a list of messages that is prepared by C itself. She will simply choose a list of messages before she tries to get access to the A signature. So in this case, C does not have any idea of A's public key. C is having no idea on the A's public key. So for this reason, we can call this as a generic chosen message attack. Why? Because the attacker does not depend on A's public key. She is having no idea on A's public key. So, she doesn't know anything about A's public key. So, this type of attack is called as a generic attack. The attack is done in a generic fashion. It is not done based upon some known information like the A's public key. So, that is called as the generic chosen message attack. So, once she prepares some messages, some chosen messages, and she sends it to A will sign it and she will send it. A will resend it. Based upon the messages that have been received from A, C will be knowing some important information related to the signatures. This is called as the generic chosen message attack. And the next type of attack is the directed chosen message attack. We can also see from this term that it is also an attack based upon a chosen message, but it is directed. Generic means you have the attacker will not have any idea on the sender's public key, but directed means the attacker will be having some idea on the A's public key, which is the sender's public key. So, whenever the attacker is having some idea about this A's public key, then that type of attack we call it as the attack on the chosen message based upon the direct mechanism. Right. So, it is almost similar to that of a generic attack, except that the list of messages to be signed is chosen after C knows A's public key. Right. And the last type of attack is the adaptive chosen message attack. So, this is also a type of attack on the chosen message, but it is adaptive in nature. Adaptive means it can calculate it on its own, right. So, in this type of attack, what this attacker will do is, she will make use of A as an mediator. See here the logic, how beautiful logic it is. The attack is on A itself, and what this C will do is, she will make use of this A as a mediator. That means we can also say that it as a oracle. So, A is chosen as a oracle. That means A may request signatures of messages that depend on previously obtained message signature pairs. So, instead of C, A will be performing the request of the messages. Why? Because you can see here that A is a genuine party in the network. For example, you assume that there is a network of systems here. A is one of the genuine party. If C asks the signature of B, it will not give. But if A asks the signature of B, maybe it is shared. Why? Because both of them are genuine parties. They are involved in the communication. Right. So, what C is going to do is, she will make use of A as a mediator, and she will make this A to request the signatures of the messages that depend on the previous messages. So, these are the various types of attacks that can happen on the signatures. The main intention of the attacker is to know the signature of the genuine parties. The key only attack means C only knows A's public key. Known message attack means C has access to some set of messages, and thereby she can get the signatures of the party A. And the last three categories, generic chosen message attack, directed chosen message attack, adaptive chosen message attack, are all attacks based upon the chosen message. That means C will be generating some calculated message, and they will make use of the things to get the signatures. Generic means C will not have any idea on the A's public key. Directed means C will be having, or C knows the A's public key. And finally, adaptive chosen message attack means C will make use of the A services to get the signatures of the genuine parties. So with the basic idea on what are these attacks that can happen on the signatures, let us go our discussion, or let us move our discussion to the forgeries that the attacker can do on the genuine communication. These are the 4 types of forgeries that can happen. The first one is the total break. So how can the total communication become compromised? It is compromised whenever the adversary or the attacker C knows the private key of the A. So when the attacker knows the private key of A, then everything is compromised. Whatever communication that goes from the party A everything is compromised. So that is called as a total break. Everything is broken. Right. See how they have named the terms also. Total break means the entire security has been breached. This happens only when the private key of the sender is known to the attacker. And the second type of forgery is the universal forgery. See, by looking at this term, you can say that the forgery happens universally. That means what this attacker will do is, this attacker C, he or she will find another efficient signing algorithm. So the attacker will find out an efficient signing algorithm this algorithm is capable of generating or constructing the signatures. Which is equal to that of a genuine signature. So this is the type of attack we have, which is called as universal forgery. The attacker will create a new algorithm which is so efficient that it will create the signatures which are almost equal to that of a genuine signatures. And the third type of attack is selective, or the third type of forgery is the selective forgery. In this, what happens is the attacker C forges a signature for a particular message chosen by C. Selective, it is going to select a particular message. C is going to select a particular message and she is going to put a forgery on that particular single message or selective messages. The last type of forgery is the existential forgery. So this is almost similar to that of selective forgery only. C is going to generate some set of messages, but C is going to forge a signature for at least one message. One message will be forged by C. And this forgery of single message consequently makes the other messages also vulnerable to the forgery attack. These are the 5 types of attacks that can happen on the signatures, and these are the 4 types of forgeries that can happen on the signatures. Once we know about all these attacks and forgeries that can happen from an attacker to a genuine user or the genuine sender, based upon these attacks and the forgeries, we can prepare some properties for the digital signatures to counter these attacks and forgeries. So our main intention is that these attacks should not happen or these forgeries should not happen. For this purpose, we should know what actually these attacks are and we should know what actually the forgeries are. And once we have an idea on this, we can prepare the properties or we can simply make the properties for the generation of the digital signatures. Let us see the properties of these digital signatures or the requirements of these digital signatures. The first requirement is the signature must be a bit pattern and that signature must be completely dependent on message being signed, right. So whatever message, for example, you have two messages M1 and M2 like this. Whenever you want to sign this message M1, you generate a digital signature based upon the bits that are present inside this M1. Similarly, whenever you want to sign this M2, you prepare a signature based upon the bits that are present inside this M2. So there should be a relationship between the signature and the message that you are going to sign. Not that a signature is based, for example, if you want to sign this M1, you don't take this M2 and prepare a signature. This is not acceptable. You should, the signature and the message that you are going to send, they should have a strong bonding. The simple point is, you generate a signature based upon the message you are going to send, and that signature is nothing but a bit pattern, simple thing. And the second requirement of the digital signatures is the signature must use some unique information related to the sender, right. As I told that in the first requirement, I told that the signature is generated based upon the message, and in the second point, the signature is based upon the message plus some private information or some private info which is unique to sender. Don't simply signature preparation is nothing, generation of signature is nothing but you just take the message and you do something and you prepare a signature. It's not the thing, right. For preparing a signature, you have to make use of the original message contents and you have to make use of the information that is completely unique to the sender. Why we are involving this signature, why we are involving this private information of the user is, it helps, the private information helps to prevent or to protect the message from the forgeries and the denial attacks, what we have seen in the earlier cases, case 1 and case 2, right. So that is the importance of the unique information of the sender. The sender information usage in the generation of the signature helps us to prevent the forgery and denial, and the remaining things are very simple, right. So the generation of the digital signature must be relatively easy to produce. It should not involve a lot of complex mathematical formulas. It should not involve a lot of complex mathematical operations or functions. It should not happen, right. It should be very simple to generate a digital signature. And similarly, the fourth requirement, this is also a very simple thing. It must be relatively easy to recognize and verify the digital signature, right. Here one important point that I would like to discuss here is the digital signatures consists of two important parts. The first part is the generation of the digital signature, and the second part, the generation of the digital signature will be done at the sender side, and the second part is verification of the digital signature, and this verification part will be done at the receiver part. So sender is involved in generation of the digital signature and receiver should involve inside the verification of the digital signature. So one requirement is the digital signature should be easily generated. Okay, this is done. Next, when I send the data along with the signature to the receiver has to recognize that signature and he has to verify it. So the recognition and verification of this digital signature should be made easy. No complex things should be involved in recognition and verification, right. So in order to easily recognize the signature, you can observe that the message is always, or the signature is always appended with the message. So the last part of the message, what is received at the receiver end, will be the digital signature. So it will be very easy to recognize. So this is one technique you can use. And the next requirement, it is a very important. These are simple requirements, but important. Simple in the sense it is not important, right? So simple and important, and these are the very much required things, and similarly these two are very important. And the fifth requirement is it must be computationally infeasible to forge a digital signature. So whatever digital signature you are generating at the sender side, there should not be an alternative procedure to generate the same type of signatures. That is, we say that it should be computationally infeasible to forge a digital signature. Maybe you cannot construct a new message for an existing digital signature, that should not be feasible, right? Here you can see two different cases. One is generation of new message for an existing digital signature, and the second case is constructing a fraud signature. These are the two ways you can forge the things. There is an already existing message or a new message is there, and you cannot take the already existing digital signature and you append it to the new message. This should not happen. Similarly, there should not be a provision to construct a fraud signature and add it to your own messages. So these two cases should be completely avoided, and the requirement of the digital signature is they should be computationally infeasible to forge the digital signatures. And the last one is it must be practical to retain a copy of digital signature in storage, right? So it is not that much suggestible, but the author has given that one. But why the author is saying to store the digital signatures or to retain a copy of the digital signature in the storage means for verification purpose, or for if there is any dispute that happened between the two communicating parties. In such case, as I told that there should be a third party that should resolve the disputes. So the third party should know the digital signature information. So for that purpose, the author is suggesting to retain a copy of the digital signature in the storage. But most of the cases, sometimes if you store the digital signatures in the storage, there are a lot of probabilities that the attacker will attack that particular storage and they will get the digital signatures. Of course, if the digital signatures are encrypted or stored in the encrypted format, he will not get anything. But if it is not encrypted and you store the digital signatures as it is in the storage, there are a lot of probabilities that the attacker will attack that storage and he will get all the information related to the digital signature. And sometimes the requirements says that the digital signatures should be changed from time to time. As we know that one of the fundamental requirement or fundamental property of the digital signature is you should include the time stamp. You should include the date and time of the message when you are sending, the date and time should be included in the signature generation, right? So in such case, it is better that you create new signatures all the time. It is almost 100% secure that if you generate the digital signatures, each and every time you send the message based upon the timestamp, it is more suggestible rather than storing all the digital signatures in the storage. But this is one of the requirements. You better store the digital signatures in the storage so that any further disputes that happen between the communicating parties may be resolved using this. Right. So, these are all the digital requirements for the digital signature. And the last topic of our discussion is the direct digital signature. Right. So, before this, let me tell you one thing. Who is going to generate the digital signature? There are two ways of generating the digital signatures. One way is the sender will be directly involved in generating the signatures. Sender will directly make use of his own private information, and he will make use of the message contents, and he will generate the digital signature. That is one case. The second case is you can make use of a trusted third party. So, some third party, you can simply give the process of generating the signatures and maybe verifying the signatures to a trusted third party also. You rely on some other person for your signature. They are going to generate the signatures on behalf of the sender, and they are going to verify the digital signatures on behalf of the receiver. So, this is based on the trusted third party. This is one case where the sender will be taking the responsibility of generating the digital signature, and the second case is the trusted third party will take the responsibility of generating these digital signatures. Let us postpone our discussion of digital signature generation using the trusted third party. So, if the digital signature scheme involves only the communicating parties, that is the source and the destination, or the sender and the receiver, then we call such type of digital signature process as, or digital signature scheme as, the direct digital signature scheme. So, in this direct digital signature, the name itself is saying direct involvement, the direct involvement of the two communicating trusted parties, or the two communicating genuine parties will be there. So, the sender and receiver are going to take care of all the digital signature scheme. That type of digital signature scheme, we are calling it as the direct digital signature scheme. And for this to happen, for the two parties to involve in the digital signature scheme, it is assumed that the destination knows the public key of the source. Right. So, it involves only the communicating parties, and for this to happen, as I told that the destination should always know the public key of the sender or the source. We told we have seen the diagrammatical representation earlier, right? This one. The sender will be using the private key for signature part, and the receiver will be using the public key of the sender for the decryption purpose. So, this is the reason why the destination should know the public key of the sender. So, for direct digital signature scheme, the destination or the receiver should know the public key of the sender or the source. And here you should understand how you are going to provide the confidentiality. We know this particular service very well. We are discussing about the confidentiality service from the starting point onwards. Confidentiality is a security service that can take place once we make use of the technique called as the encryption and decryption. And we have seen different schemes of encrypting the hash value itself, or encrypting the message itself, or encrypting the message plus hash value combinedly. All these are different schemes we can make use in this, depending upon the service which you want. If you want both the confidentiality and the authentication, then you take the hash value which is taken as the authentication, and then you combine it with the message and then you encrypt it. That provides the confidentiality of both the entire message as well as the authentication code. In the similar fashion, here also in the digital signatures concept, when you want to provide the confidentiality, you can provide it by encrypting the entire message plus signature. So what the sender has to do is, since it is a direct digital signature scheme, the sender will take care of generating the digital signature, and once he has generated the digital signature, he can combine it with the message and then he can encrypt it to get the security service, which is confidentiality, right. And this is this confidentiality, that means encrypting the entire message plus the digital signatures, will be done based upon the symmetric encryption. We know what this symmetric encryption is. So both the parties, the sender and the receiver, they make use of a single key to perform both the encryption and the decryption. That is called as shared secret key. And here one important point you should understand here, whether the signature is to be performed first or the confidentiality, very important. So we note these two terms, one is the signature and the second one is confidentiality. The confusion arises here is whether we need to perform the signature first and then the confidentiality, or the confidentiality first and then the signature later. The point you have to remember is the signature should be performed first and then you apply the confidentiality. This is very important. So this we are calling it as, for example, I am just signing it like this, and above this I am protecting the signature using confidentiality. Since I am providing the confidentiality service above this signature, digital signature, I can call this as outer confidentiality. So this is inner signature function and this is outer confidentiality function. Why we need to follow this rule? Why we need to put the signature first and then the confidentiality later? Means in case of dispute, I told that in case of dispute some third party must be involved. Some third party must be able to view the message and its signature. So if the signature is calculated on the encrypted message, so third party, as I told that resolution of disputes by the third parties, they should have some idea on the parties as well as they should have some idea on the message also. Why? Because the signature itself is prepared or generated based upon the message. So the third party should have an access to view the message and its signature. But assume that the reverse case, what happens if it is reverse? That means you put the encryption first and then the signature later. So if the signature is calculated on an encrypted message, let us see this the reverse case. So you have the message and you perform the confidentiality and then you put the signature. The third party, he can access the signature, but in order to access this message, remember that resolution of disputes requires both the messages and signatures to be viewed by the third parties. They should have access to both the message and signatures. But if the message is encrypted and then you put the signature on the encrypted message, the third party will have access to signature. Okay, S is accessible. But what about the M? It is encrypted. So if it is encrypted, it is not going to the third party. He has no access to this original message. Third party is having access to the encrypted message. That's a different case. But with the encrypted message, he cannot get any useful information. Without the useful information from the actual message, he cannot resolve the disputes. For example, assume that this is the case we have followed and this is something encrypted like this. So, this message has to be decrypted. If you allow the third party to decrypt the message, then everything is compromised. We cannot completely trust on this third party, right? So, if some third party is involved, we can rely upon only up to some extent only. You cannot completely give access to everything. And why you are not accepting this decryption part to be known to the third party? So, once this third party knows how to decrypt the things, so the third party can decrypt the remaining messages also, right? So, we are allowing the third party to know the message and signature of that particular message only. But if you encrypt the message and then you put the signature, the third party is going to get the information related to the signature, but the encrypted message has to be decrypted. So, you must involve the third party for the decryption of this message. So, the decryption of this message involves the public key. If you allow the public key to be known to other third parties, then there are a lot of attacks that can happen. So, you have seen lot of attacks like this one, key only attack, known message attack. These attacks can happen. So, you cannot completely rely on the third party. Because of this purpose, where you need to resolve the disputes using the third party, you have to first perform the signature and then you have to encrypt the things. But there are a lot of problems with this particular thing also. If the signature is given as the inner operation and then you have the confidentiality as the outer service, then the third party can store the plain text message and its signature for later use in dispute resolution. That we have both the pros and cons in all these things, right? But you just remember only these important points, that the direct digital signature is a digital signature scheme which involves the only communicating parties. And for this to happen, the destination should know the public key of the source. And we have discussed something related to the confidentiality and how we are going to provide the confidentiality means by encrypting the entire message plus signature with the symmetric encryption. And we have discussed something that is related to when we have to perform the signature, is it the first operation or the confidentiality should be the first operation. So, the author suggests that signature function should be the first and then the confidentiality should be the outer function. This is something to resolve the disputes using the third party. And the last important point we are going to discuss is the validity of the scheme that was just described depends on the security of the sender's private key. So, there are some different threats. For example, assume that the sender wants to deny sending a particular message. This sender's private key is very important. For example, if the sender denies, he don't want to send a message to that particular party or the genuine receiver, what the sender can simply say is, he can simply say that my private key was lost, or somebody has stolen my private key, or somebody has forged my signature by stealing my private key. So, the importance of private key is always the same in all the scenarios, whether it is the encryption part, whether you are giving the confidentiality service, or whether it is the digital signatures part. The private key is very important. It should not be revealed to others. And there can be another threat. If is that the some private key might actually be stolen from one party, right? For example, some attacker has stolen the private key. Let us say the private key as X, has stolen the private key of this one party, let us say A, and this happened at time interval T. At the latter point of time, the attacker can send the message to the genuine party, that is B. This is my message. He can send it to B by putting this private key, by making use of this private key, and actually the sending of message to B happened at something later than this T, that is at T plus 1 or T plus 2 or something like that. But what he can do is, the attacker simply, when he is sending the message, since he is having the private key of A, he can change the timestamp and he can put the signature, or he can generate the signature with the timestamp before this T. So he can simply say that the message has been sent by the genuine user A only. This also can happen if you lose the private key. And for all these particular attacks or for particular threats or forgeries to happen, or in order to stop these attacks or forgeries or threats, the universally accepted technique for dealing with these threats is the use of the digital certificate and certificate authorities. I think this is not there in our syllabus point of view. So, we are not going to discuss about these digital certificates and certificate authorities. So, let us see that whatever threats and attacks we have discussed till now, only one solution we can suggest, only one solution the others are going to suggest is, we make use of the digital certificates by some certificate authorities. I think it is there, we will discuss once the topic is there, we will surely discuss on these digital certificates and certification authorities also. So, this is what I want to discuss in today's session. In today's session, let us have a quick recap. In today's session, we started our discussion with the message authentication, what are the problems that we have in the message authentication, like the forgery and denial, and what is that we need to have this to avoid these type of attacks by the genuine parties itself. That is the solution, only attractive solution we have is the digital signature, and we have discussed the properties of the digital signatures, and then we have seen the generalized essential elements of the digital signature process. We have seen some attacks and forgeries that can happen on the signatures. These are the 5 types of attacks, like key only attack, known message attack, generic chosen message attack, directed chosen message, like that. And forgeries, we have 4 types, that is total break, universal forgery, selective forgery and existential forgery. And based upon the attacks and forgeries, we can get the requirements of the digital signatures. We have seen that the digital signature should be prepared based upon the message as well as some private information that is unique to the sender. Similarly, it should be easy to produce or to generate the digital signature. It should be easy to recognize and verify the digital signature, and it should be computationally infeasible to forge a digital signature. And finally, it is better to store a copy of the digital signature in the storage. And we have ended up our topic with a concept on direct digital signature, where it is a digital signature scheme which involves both the communicating parties only. We do not rely on the third party. That's all for today's session. Thank you one and all for joining the session.